Good day and good evening, and welcome back to Walk and Talk with me, Caetsu Chaiji, but you can just call me Kai. So, as usual, the way that this works, for those that haven't been to a Walk and Talk before, is I start somewhere. It's usually where we were last time. We walk to somewhere, and nowadays we take a few stops on the way. And as we do, we review clips that you all have given me through the Discord server in the clip reviews room, which can range from, oh, there was this cool thing that happened, to what happened here? Like, what's the explanation for this thing, weird mechanic that happened, or I would like some advice for my gameplay, or what have you. It can be a lot of things, and we check it out, and then we see if there's something to learn, or if it's funny, or what it is. And in the meantime, this is also like a Q&A stream. If you wanted to ask me something, if you want to discuss something, and that topic you feel like could require some conversation, this is a great place to do that. Could also be someone posting footage from a game they like. The thing is, something that is important to note is that ultimately, I try my best to reach everyone, and sometimes a clip is like, you know, if the person isn't there, then I will often just not review it. And if they're not there for enough time, then I'll be like, well, this is like 4 months ago. And then you will have to essentially post it again if you're actually really curious to get the response. But I haven't ran into that situation yet. I have also so far yet to have need to go, well, we can't get to all of them. Usually we'll just get to them next time. But I can actually see we have 14 clips. A quick estimate is 14 clips. And I don't have them preloaded this time, because last time I had so many clips that I noticed that my PC was somehow chugging a bit. Like it was acting weird. It was slowing down the overlay. Weird things like that. So I don't have them loaded. I have all the links, but we're not loading all of it, because apparently YouTube takes a lot of power. Weird that. Now, that said, hey Mizum, hey Taldemar, hey Sally, hey Zav, hey Aradil, hey Kaj, hey Bobomet, hey Yves, hey Jen Monica, hey Tinley, hey Saras, hey Lana, hey Kat, hey Nox, hey DPS, hey Ilya, hey Bob, hey Rust, hey Ham, hey Jeff, and hey Shaman. Hope you're all doing very well. All the clips you need, an extended magazine. I do know Shaman has a clip, and I do know that I briefly looked at it and determined that there was a lot to talk about on that one. So we might just start with that. I think what Nox meant, Ilana, is that there's a possibility that Nox will miss the chance if he's not reminded. I was like, Yazzle, hope you're doing well. Yeah, I don't know what to say, Shaman. Basically, within the first 30 seconds or so, I was like, Like, I was just gonna glance over to be like, okay, you've got it. Only to be like, well, we have something to talk about. It might be that once you get started, it's fine. But let's just say that the start was weird. The start was weird. Let's see here, as I recall. Isn't it possible? I think it's possible. Whoop. Possible to go like this? Oh, thank you. Isn't it possible to get up over here or something? Thoughts? Or do we have to use the bridge? Alan says yes. Don't worry, Shaman. I don't... See, the thing is, people joke that I roast them on clips like that. That's not intentional, if it's even true. I just try to help. Yeah, that is very likely, Nox. For those that don't know, Nox has been submitting some clips of gradually playing through a run of Hades 2 to show off this game that he loves very much. But because this game is so extremely unrelated to what I normally do, I have usually done it at the end of the stream if I've done it, because then those that like, I don't care about Hades 2 can just be like, well, then the stream is over for me, and then just head off, and that's fine, right? And I will probably also have to do something similar with Expedition 33 clips. Partly because some might go, oh, well, I don't want to get spoilers. Even if they've, like, they might not have been watching my playthrough because of spoilers. And then, like, they just get, like, chased into other streams as well. Like, what do they do then? Also, pretty crazy, Ilana celebrating an 85 stream streak. It's a lot. It's a lot. Amy, who else? Hope you're doing well. So on the note of clips we have, I have a clip from Zaf. I'm just gonna list all the clips I have in stock. I have a clip from Zaf. I have 2 clips from Shaq. Although we may still have to revisit that one, one of them. I have a clip from Milo, also something that might be revisited. We have the Hades clip from Nox. We have a clip from Stainless that I think might be short because it's something specific that wanted to be shown. Liam posted a little video showing off a little trick. And Shaman has the Black Mage rotation stuff. Ham also has a video that might be grabbed for later. The key is that there's 3 POVs of M10S. So I'll see what we do about that. Ivis also posted a clip of clearing one of the bosses in Another Merchant's Tale. Audrey posted also an M10S clip. We have a lot of bros. Shaq was the one that posted an Expedition 33 clip. Yannick has some Palace of the Dead. And, oh, I don't remember the name off the top of my head. And because my OBS was open, their default name was hidden. But it's someone that is on the JP data centers whose name starts with a Z or Z. Posted something on M9S. And then Gazel posted something from the Alliance raid. So we have a lot. Bob says, what does the enmity meter in the party list actually show? I've been top of the list as machinist with I-750 and been bottom of the list with Pictomancer, Reaper, or Viper, regardless of level or item level. So the way that... Yeah, Zanko, thank you. The way that the enmity list in the party list works is that the person for which the bar is red and full, they have aggro, like they're actively being targeted. For whoever, I think this might not be the way we're supposed to get up. We may have to fall back down. I just saw it ramp up and went up it. Oops. Whoever has a yellow bar means that they're second. Well, Shaman, we'll see. I usually ask who's here before I review a clip, so that I know that the person is there. The yellow enmity bar is the second highest in enmity. And all the blue ones after that are, are ranking. The way that it works is that your bar is filled relative to how much enmity you have, proportional to who has the most. So if hypothetically, say, I think we may miss the off ramp completely. Oh boy. Well, this is gonna be a longer walk. So if, for instance, the tank has 100,000 enmity, and you have 50,000, and everyone else is below you, for whatever reason, then your bar will be half full and yellow. The tank will, of course, have a red full one, and everyone else will have less than you. The reason why the enmity list can be a bad measure of your damage output is because other things generate enmity. And some things generate enmity that doesn't really add to damage. So, for instance, just as a really arbitrary example, summoning Bahamut doesn't do damage, but generates 1 enmity. 1 singular point of enmity. Basically generates non-zero. Limit breaks also generate exactly 1 point of enmity. For some reason. Healing generates enmity unless it is healing over time. I don't actually know for sure if barriers generate enmity. That would be pretty easy to test. I'm guessing that they generate buff enmity. But they might also generate enmity relative to cure potency or something. But because of that, it means that some jobs may swing. There's also the part that because of the fact that jobs do damage in bursts, some jobs may perform better on enmity than others momentarily. For example, if a boss fight starts on Pictomancer, like in a dungeon, and you just used your 2-minute burst, so it isn't available for the boss, then the Pictomancer damage is gonna be really bad, relatively speaking, until they hit their burst. If, on the other hand, the Machinist saved a full battery gauge, 2 hypercharge windows, and all of their tools are available, and Wildfire wasn't used, they're of course gonna do a lot more damage, and their enmity is gonna be higher. Another common example is that I believe Reaper's Burst, especially at lower level, their opener is so weak at lower levels that, like, you might not actually want to give them a card or give them a personal damage buff. You might not want to close position them, but when it comes to the 2-minute burst a little later, they're perfectly fine. In fact, at lower levels, they might be a little stronger. Just depends. Depends on random things. There's a lot to it. But essentially, because healing, for example, matters for enmity, you can't fully trust enmity. Let's just say that a long time ago, at this point, I had a Shiva Extreme run with a white mage that... The best way I could explain it, the way they played, is that they were so scared and so confused and so overwhelmed by the fight that their solution was, I'm just gonna hold my hands in front of my eyes, I'm just gonna close my eyes and just spam heal, AoE healing until we win. And then we just hope that we win first. And the problem is that you can't cast Medica 2 that many times. So they would, like, run out of MP within, like, a minute. And then they would spend the rest of the fight on fumes. Just like, 1 Medica 2. Hey. 1 Medica 2. And so on. But they, because of that, were, like, third in enmity. Because while Medica 2 generates a lot of healing over time, let's just say that 1,600 cure potency, because AoE, adds up to a lot of enmity. Even when you account for the fact that healing generates half as much enmity as damage, point for point, and that a lot of healing spells, especially from healers, have some sort of innate additional enmity dampener from you know, like Stormblood days when healers actually had problems where they were over-aggroing the tanks due to healing. I was saying, Yannick and Naomi, hope you're doing well. So like, we had P9S proc where White Mage got the first tank buster because the off tank forgot stance. The double Blood Lily opener just beat everyone enmity. That's also a good point. White Mage actually has some insane burst nowadays. Absolutely insane burst. But yeah, that is essentially the problem with using enmity as a DPS meter, is that it is unreliable. Because some things count that doesn't apply to damage. Like, for instance, you said your example with Machinist. That is surprising because the other jobs you listed have cases where they might be able to generate extra enmity from healing. Like, you listed Pictomancer. Their Star Prism technically has like an additional 3,000 in a raid team, of course. 3,200 cure potency, just ghost potency, because it heals. And it's upfront healing, so it does count. But for the most part, most of the time when it's a DPS doing healing, generating extra enmity, if they're ahead in enmity because of the healing, then they would not be very far behind without the healing enmity. Like, it's usually such a small footnote in the grand scheme of things that it doesn't really matter. Yannick says Peloton casually grabbing all mobs before tank has hit them. Yes, that is buff enmity. Essentially, the way that works is that using Peloton applies a buff, and applying a buff to someone who's in combat generates a minuscule amount of enmity. Like, enough enmity that it technically does something, but it's so little that it's not gonna matter. That's not gonna make the difference. The only time where it's gonna make the difference is buff enmity tends to win over buff enmity. It loses to basically anything beyond minuscule damage. Like, a black mage auto-attacking something is beaten by buff enmity. A tank auto-attacking something beats buff enmity. Of course, with tank stance. Which is also why tank stance flipping can actually hold, can technically hold or at least grab AoE aggro in lower level content. I've showed this off in Pulling Poison Posses, one of the guild tests that have like waves of mobs spawning. If you're in combat with them and you flip your tank stance off and turn it on again, then you generate 10 times buff enmity on all those enemies, which is again basically nothing. But it is more than zero. Rust, I believe the reason is that for some reason the overlay doesn't know how to read watch streak messages. Bob says, I also just realized White Mage starts with 3 lilies and 3 and blood lilies. When did that change? In 7.4. Like 2 months, like 3 months ago. Two and a half months ago, I think. Sprocket says, I got a dumb question. Does weapon damage affect anything besides auto attack damage? The damage number on your weapon affects all damage you do. Unless you're a blue mage, in which case it doesn't. All damage, and it affects all output from the player. In fact, +1 point of damage on your weapon is more impactful than any other stat in your equipment. Which is also the reason why usually if you have the choice, you upgrade your weapon first. If you have the choice. Usually you don't really. But yeah. The part that auto attack interacts with, where it says auto attack, the funny thing there is that the auto attack number is actually used to basically explain the proportional damage, because the way auto attacks work and is balanced, to my knowledge, is that weapon auto attacks do 30 potency per second. Per second. Scaling with either strength or dexterity, depending on the job. If you're not a dexterity specific job, then it still scales with strength, which means, you know, healers and casters scale with strength. So it's 30 potency per second based off your strength stat, which means that it's not a lot. For most casters and healers nowadays, it's 1 at max level, because the amount of strength you need for it to actually increase your auto attack, or rather your physical damage, is more than the strength you gain per level up. So basically, as you level up, you get less value out of your strength because of the way that stats work. And this means that, as you notice, the auto attack, the delay on a weapon is actually the amount of seconds between auto attacks. So for instance, this fishing rod swings every 3.2 seconds by default. And because it has to be 30 potency per second, that will of course mean that the proportional damage is 3.2 times 30 potency per second. Grimmy says, can I ask another follow-up on that? What about Scholar? Ah, see, that's the trick. So let me show you. Black Mage has done 1 damage with their auto attacks since level 90. Their strength stat is not even 200. Red Mage, Pictomancer, White Mage, Sage, and Astrologian all did more than 1 damage with their auto attacks in Endwalker, with White Mage, I believe, doing something like 20 at level 90. In Dawntrail at level 100, they do 1 damage. Now, the reason why Summoner, notice the strength stat by the way, guys, Summoner and Scholar do more than 100 damage with their auto attacks now, and it's still increasing, is because they have some strength. That's why. It's basically, in Endwalker, there was a myth, you may recall, that I made the Final Fantasy XIV Mythbuster series. One of the first myths that I addressed was the suggestion that Black Mage was programmed internally to only be able to do 1 damage with their auto attacks. Except the only time that this was ever true was Endwalker at level 90. Or maybe a bit before level 90. But basically, people saw that Black Mage did 1 damage with auto attacks and no other job did, and just wrote this falsity and ran with it. Black Mage's auto attack damage tops at like level 45 or something like that, if I recall correctly. And then it starts to drop. Also, hey Matthew, and Flims, and Sprocket, and Stainless, and Brianna, and Eon, and Asymmetricon. Hope you're all doing very well. It's just job stat scaling. Yes, basically because casters don't find any strength on their gear, their auto attack damage is fully dictated by how much strength they gain naturally and level up. And only summoners and scholars get a relevant amount of strength on level up. And the way that stats work in general, for those that don't know. So what you may have noticed, and I'm explaining this because some players have this like revelation when I explain this. Just making sure that we got it right. In low-level dungeons, like, or rather at low level, you'll find gear with like 1 point of critical hit on it. Straight up 1 point. Some players don't realize that the amount of stats on gear is less effective the higher level you are. Basically, at level 15, 1 point of critical hit can be worth something in the ballpark of like 0.3% more crit chance. Maybe more. 1 point of critical hit. I believe that 0.1% of critical hit at max level. I don't know the exact number. Someone can correct me or get it exactly. But like you need like I think like 50 or more critical hit to gain 0.1% of more critical hit. I believe you get the direct hit is a lot more impactful. But the important bit is that you need way more stats for the same result, because if it didn't work like that, then, like, let's just say that what would happen is that at level 15, you would get 1 point of critical hit and it would do nothing. At level 60, you would get, I don't know, 30 points of critical hit on a piece and it would do nothing. And at level 80, you'd get like a piece with like 100 crit on it and you would get like a little bit. And then you get to level 100 and then it does something. So to make sure that the stats are impactful without it getting pointless, without it being pointless at low level or too strong at high level, there's a scaling. And this scaling also applies to attributes, where essentially, for some reason, I'm not sure how they calculate it, but long story short, the reason why casters do 1 damage with their auto attacks is because their strength is so low that they basically gain either 0 or negative damage points. Because the thing is, I think it's the negative angle, because as you may know, if you unequip all of your gear, all of your stats have like a starting point, like a minimum value. That minimum value doesn't do anything. Like these 420 skill speed, blaze it, don't do anything. That's just the default. They don't do anything. But any point past that does something. So if the base value of strength is like, I don't know, 300 at level 100, then Black Mage is so deep down in the negative that their auto attacks do like are supposed to do like negative 30 damage, but because they can't do less than 1, they do 1 damage. That's also why you can get a critical direct hit for 1 damage as a Black Mage. Exactly, Stainless. At level 50, the best material you can get for crit gave you 4 points. Compare that to the 52 you get today. Actually, 54. But yeah. If it says at level 100, crit is increased every 13.9 points for a rate and damage up of 0.1%. Thank you. I specifically remembered that at level 15, 1 point of crit gives you multiple increments, and at max level you need a lot of points. But I definitely exaggerated the one of those values. But yeah, that is kind of how it works. Also, hey, Held Haller, hope you're doing well. I didn't know Booksmart is equal to Giga Ripped. I believe the best explanation to this one is, I think the first game where Scholar existed as a job, the only thing Scholar could do was, I don't remember, I believe it's called Scan. That's usually a spell. And what the spell does in the games where it's present is it tells you the health of your target. It might explain some stats. It'll explain its weaknesses and its resistances. Like, it basically gives you a summary of what the enemy is, which you could just look up. Except the health. Or if the enemy can change their state during the fight, then you need to check it. Like, you have to scan it to check where it is. And there was a specific fight in, thank you, Sally, in Final Fantasy III. I believe there was a specific boss which I think was heavily inspired by... What's his name? Let the curtains rise for the main attraction. I believe it was the inspiration for him. What was his name? From Crystal Tower. Susano! No. Amon, yes. I think he had a different name, but it's definitely Amon. Like, the model is correct. And his whole gimmick is that he changes... He's basically... I might remember this wrong, I might exaggerate some points, but he's basically impervious to damage unless you hit his weakness. And he changes his weakness regularly. So what you need to do is you need to either guess, and it's gonna be a long fight then, or you bring a scholar to just scan him. Oh, I wasn't saying that it wasn't him. I'm basically saying that the name might be different in Final Fantasy III. And yeah, the Crystal Towers from Final Fantasy III. Yes. And because, basically, again, if I recall correctly, in Final Fantasy III, each job had, you know, basic attack and an ability. And for casters, the ability was access to their spell list. For more physical jobs, the ability was the specific thing they do. So, Scholar used scan. Instead of having a spell list where scan was part of it, they could scan. Fantastic. And then I think it was Sally mentioned that Scholar specifically had a passive that made items more effective, which compensated for them being, you know, a little bit screwed otherwise. But that still means that how does a Scholar fight? They use scan items and smack that with whatever they were wielding. So strength was a relevant stat for them. And in a way, that makes the fact that scholars and summoners have a relevant strength stat essentially a reference to Final Fantasy III. As I've said before, Final Fantasy XIV is basically like one big love letter to all of the Final Fantasy games. It's just a huge mega mix of references, and it's almost a shock when they make something new. And that's not meant as a bad thing. I'll say Peppercat and Bromtom, hope you're doing well. And Gustavo, hope you're doing well as well. But yeah, exactly. Scholar in that game was, to my knowledge, so bad that you only used it for that fight. And I believe you also conveniently unlocked Scholar shortly before that fight. It was almost like they went, here's the counter. Go on then. And you didn't need it for anything else. Like, let's just say, why use a turn on checking the opponent? I'd enjoy work, Sprocket. Why use a turn on checking how much health the opponent has? What help does that give you? Wouldn't it be, like, if you're actually at a position where you're like, I need, like, I'm running out of resources, how long is the fight still? You don't have a turn to spare to check if the opponent is near death. And that's the last thing you want to do. I mentioned this before, in the Final Fantasy mod to Crystal Project, a few jobs have scan in some form or another, including Red Mage. There's also a passive that just auto-scans enemies. You can also equip an accessory that auto-scans enemies. But the thing is, the information you get when you scan enemies is just how much health they have. And once you've beaten an enemy once, the game just goes, well, you know that enemy now. And then it just tells you outright. So you only need to scan an enemy the first time you meet it, which means every boss fight. If you care. You can also just wait, because it'll still turn their health or like a red color when they're dying. So you don't need that much information. You can just be like, well, they're not near death because their health is their name is white. Okay, now their name is like a little bit red, so now they're actually like nearing, and now it's really red, so they're close to death. I don't need more information. But the trick here is that the jobs that had scan had it as basically a free action. It didn't cost your turn, but it had a cooldown. But you could scan something and then just do the rest of your turn after that. Red Mage specifically, their scan technically did spend their turn, but because of the mechanics of the dual cast in this mod, scan was also a way to set up a dual cast for free. Like the way that it worked, just to give a very short summary here, is if you cast a spell, it had a cast time, shock, and a cost, but then once that cast had happened, dual cast let you just have another turn once you have cast it. So once the cast time was over, you got to fire and then go again. Where normally casters would like cast and then like now their turn timer starts. But the dual cast then could have things like specifically you used a basic attack on your dual cast turn, it did more damage and recovered mana. So you could use that to like restore MP for free. But because scan was free and didn't cost anything, it allowed you to basically just instantly, because you also skipped cast times on the dual cast turn. So you could basically just use scan to go, I just want a turn now. I just want to cast right now. That's all I want. Okay, you use scan on an enemy you already know. Boom, your turn again. And you just skip the cast time. So it had a use. But the rest of the jobs, if there wasn't a practical use of scan, then it was just a free action. So Ellie says 13 has scan as a super special action that takes a specific resource, but once you use it, you have that info forever. It even updates HP as you damage them, so it's one and done per enemy. Exactly, very good. But that again means that that ability is not very useful in the fight once you already have the information, right? Rontum says, what's insane is that Red Mage autos are also bad when it's a sword class. I will say that one is quite funny. I'll say Exodi, hope you're doing well. I do think it is very funny that because strength is basically a pointless stat for casters, for the most part, they just don't like do anything with it. Like they just make like I've talked about this before. We'll get to a clip in a moment, guys. I just want to finish on this auto attack conversation. Hypothetically, if auto attacks did an actually relevant amount of damage at level 100 for casters and healers, then not being in a melee range is a relevant damage loss. Basically, I would say that this is a common problem. This is a little bit of a tangent. How does skill speed interact with auto attacks? It increases the damage of your auto attacks. Also, that is actually explained in the tooltip for skill speed. But yeah, it increases the damage of auto attacks. But not enough to make red mages do relevant auto attack damage. This is a little bit of a tangent, but basically a core problem with designing the job or the concept class Spellblade, which can mean a lot of things. Like the general idea is it's a character that fights with sword or some other melee weapon, right? And then they also use magic. That's the concept. It really varies how that concept comes to life. In some cases, it's... so what you do is you enchant your weapon and then you strike with magic in physical range. Other times, it's... you just both use sword fighting techniques and magic. So you can go stab, stab, fireball. And in other cases, it can be even more extreme to the point of, I mean, yes, you have a sword, but you're basically like primarily using magic. Like it basically, Spellblade has this huge range of what, and it depends on the individual how they see a Spellblade. Like, what do they think a Spellblade is? How much physical or magical they lean. Red Mage is an example of Spellblade, straight up. Final Fantasy 1 Red Mage is a Spellblade, this concept, because it does sword fighting techniques and it does magic. It is basically the jack of all trades. That's the origin of Red Mage. And depending on how you look at it, Paladin and Dark Knight can be considered Spellblades of sorts. The problem in the context of an RPG or an MMO, like this game, where we optimize a lot, even without the optimizing, like, it's just what makes logical sense, is, let's say that you have a Spellblade and their best attack is Fireball. Why use the sword? If all of their best attacks are ranged, then why come into melee range? You've made a wizard that happens to hold a sword as like a plushie, just to remind them that technically, if you come close, I'll stab you with my mediocre strength stat because I invested everything in intelligence. Because Fireball. If physical attacks or close combat attacks, whether it is slash or if it's a blazing touch or icy touch or lightning punch or what you want to come up with, if that's the strongest you have, then that is closer to a Spellblade in a way, but again, that also depends on your definition. But you have not made a ranged attacker, because they would only use Fireball if they have to. Enter Reaper. They have spells, technically. They have Harp. But you're not going to use that when you have better options. And the problem with making this perfect middle ground of a Spellblade that is like swing, swing, and then they jump out into distance and then cast Fireball and then they come back in for a swing again is, why don't you just cast a Fireball from melee range? Which is like, that is like the additional avenue you run into is, well, let's say that the best damage is a mix, so you both do some swing, swing, swing and some Fireball. Okay, well, why should I cast Fireball from range? And if the answer is, well, if you cast Fireball while in range, the opponent gets an opportunity attack, for example, then the question becomes, okay, well, is Fireball strong enough that it is worth it to step out of melee range to cast it? Oh, wait, that's also an opportunity attack in some of those settings, so no, can't do that either. But let's say that you could, for free, step out and cast Fireball, and then you come back in. That has to be better than just staying in melee range and just doing melee stuff. You could also add a minimum range. You could also make it so that the Fireball explodes in your face if you cast it in melee range, and things like that. But the key is that that bit tends to feel like punishment, I think, to a lot of players. It feels like... It feels a little bit like what some players have observed a lot of the Final Fantasy XIV job changes in more recent expansions as, is... whether I or you agree with that is a whole different conversation, but basically that a lot of changes to jobs have been, no, you're playing it wrong, play it like this. Like, changes to the job that kind of like hems in how you can play it, so that you can only do it the way it was designed to work. Going, oh, well, yeah, you have really strong ranged options and really strong melee options, but you can't use the ranged options while you're in melee range. And obviously you can't use the melee options while you're at range. So you have to step back and forth. Has this effect of, couldn't you have made it more elegant? Couldn't you have given me a positive reason to step out of melee range for my spellcast? Instead of a negative reason of, you have to, because I said so. That kind of angle. Which... Now we grab this whole train track that I just built off the original conversation, and then I just like super glue it back on the main track and go, the reason why Red Mage can't have a relevant auto attack is because if it did, then it would be that. It would be precisely that. Why should I go out of range? I get auto attack damage when I'm melee range. Are you crazy? No, I'm not a ranged job. I'm a melee job. Have you seen my auto attacks? QED. Boom. Which then goes, and that's why Red Mage's auto attacks have to suck. Remy says, easy fix during modification, Red Mage auto scale with int. I mean, that's an interesting solution that makes more sense now that modification gives you attack range on your melee combo. But there is something to be said that you might not want to have that either, because that just leads to the very cursed conversation that is optimal Red Mage gameplay would be to only use instant casts, or at least things without cast times for the entirety of modification to make sure you're not missing out on auto attacks. Because the way auto attacks work is when you cast a spell, it pauses your auto attack swing timer for the cast minus about half a second. You may have heard of the slide casting window. So if you cast a spell that takes 2 seconds to cast, it pauses your auto attack for 1.5 seconds, and if your auto attack does relevant damage, then you're losing, note, callback, about 45 potency. Because you lost a second and a half of auto attacking. 30 potency per second. And if that adds up, then you basically go, okay, I have modification now. Now I use my melee combo, and then I do another melee combo, and then I do Grand Impact and an instant with Thunder, and then I use Swift Cast, and I do a with Arrow, and then I do Grand Impact, and then I do another instant with Thunder, and then I do another melee combo to make sure that I can extend instants for full 30 seconds, and then you go, yeah, that sounds fine. And then the Red Mage turns around and goes, I don't have any mobility options. And then you say, skill issue, because it is. Also, hey, indeed, and late to sleep. Hope you're doing well. And I'm glad to hear that. Thank you so much, late to sleep. I'm glad. Indeed says, I was trying to give a new tank some tips, but PS4 typing is slow. Yeah, I think you can buy a keyboard for PlayStation. I'll say, cheese lover, hope you're doing well. In what context does that matter? In what context does what matter? I'll say, Zoma, hope you're doing well. And hey, Silva. Hope you're doing well as well. A melange job? A melange job? That sounds like a food topping or something. DPS says Red Mage just needs perma instant cast. Make dual cast just cast the spell 2 times. Say Rain. Hope you're doing well. The auto attack rant? It's not a rant. It was more an explanation. The origin was someone asked how auto attacks work. And then it came to, it's funny that red mages do 1 damage with their auto attacks, considering that they use a sword. And then I went on a whole tangent to explain the concept of a spell blade, and then we just returned to the original point, which is the reason why red mage auto attacks can't do a lot of damage is because if they did, then red mage wouldn't be a ranged job. Because they will lose too much damage by actually playing ranged. Basically, cheese lover, if red mage's auto attack scaled with intelligence, then every second you were not in melee range of your target could represent a potential 30 potency loss. For comparison, simply spamming jolt, just blah 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 forever, is more than 100 potency per second. Flesh is just shy of like just using flesh on cooldown is worth just shy of 20 potency per second. So, like, as these things add up, you can probably see that if auto attacks did relevant damage for a red mage, then it would be more important that you maximize your auto attacks than using flesh on cooldown. Potentially. Which is extremely cursed. How do you feel about Summoner probably losing Res next expansion? As a Scholar main and Summoner enjoy, I'm kind of excited because maybe it'll bump Summoner to a spot where it's not worse Red Mage for prog and worse caster otherwise. The complicated conversation there is, as we've seen in 7.4, Red Mage having Maraise has not really prevented it from having alright damage. The problem is, I think, so as I recall, I think they started airing this idea of removing res from casters at like just before Dawntrail launch. So if they removed res from Summoner, it is very possible that Red Mage would lose it too. The difficulty with this is that both Summoner and Red Mage have a lot of history attached to them having a raise. And there's definitely players that would be very disappointed if that happened. Exactly, Late to Sleep. It's... Let's just say that in Shadowbringers, there was a point where Red Mage was a top damage dealer. And there was a point where Summoner was a top damage dealer. There was a time where Summoner was the one getting like small nerfs every patch because they were too strong, while being mega jank. Like they had the weirdest glitches and jank that made them lose damage to moving while they had Bahamut out. And things like that. Like, long story short is that res tax is something that players made up. Ranged tax is something players made up. Both of these things are things that we have made up to try and justify and explain why jobs are the way that they are. Whether the development and job design angle actually views it as, well, Summoner has a res, so they should do less damage. Or they go, well, Summoner's very mobile, so they should do less damage, is difficult. Because, let me put it like this, if true, then they need to, like, I'm just very sorry. I'm not trying to be like, well, it's easy to be a job designer. It's not. But I'm just saying that Black Mage is arguably, when needed, more mobile than than, for instance, Summoner. Because Summoner has, like, in their rotation, a few GCDs that has to be cast, whereas Black Mage can just stockpile instant casts, which means that they can just choose when they don't have to, which is arguably sometimes more flexible, which can be better. So I think that it is more about figuring out the correct number. Let's just say that, as far as I know, the development team has said that they're relatively happy with the balance as it is right now. I don't know if, like, what the plan is, but basically, I don't think Summoner's weak because they have a res. It's also arguably Summoner's fine. It's just that someone has to be weakest. I've said this before. Indeed says, what weapon with the new 8.0 tank? If 8.0 is gonna get a tank. What would the new 8.0 tank use? On one hand, I think getting Tonfast would be cool, but on the other, what would this tank bring without canning one of the other four? Indeed, I have said, and I can say that it has been stated that that they have tried to make a tank that wields 2 shields. The story goes that they said that they can do that, and they can come up with defensives and stuff for it, but every time they come to the rotation, they draw blank. What they could be that makes them stand out from the other tanks? I don't know. My perspective is I find it incredibly unlikely that 8.0 would release without a new job. But I think personally that it would be better if they make sure to really, really focus on this supposed big job redesign thing or drop thing that they hope to do in 8.0. And really make sure that all of the jobs feel distinct, unique, and awesome. And then we can look at adding new ones, because your point of what would it add that the other 4 tanks don't already bring, I feel says a lot about the design space of Final Fantasy XIV. If you could make any change to Dark Knight, what would you change? If I could only make one change, depending on the degree of change I'm allowed, I would either say Dark Arts stacks up to 2, and or TBN also grants Dark Arts when it just ticks out. I have a lot of ideas, but if I can only choose one thing, then let's start there. What do you think of the idea about the idea of a Blitzball class? I have a feeling that that's just not gonna happen until they actually feel confident about adding actual Blitzball to the game. Because if they added a Blitzball job to the game but not Blitzball, could you imagine? And yeah, a little bit of what Sally says is that, as far as I can see, the big problem with designing jobs to be distinct from each other is that at present, the damage profile of a viable job essentially has to have a spike for 20 seconds roughly every 2 minutes. If they don't have that, then they'll have difficulty keeping up, which is not very good. Also, Young Dun, hope you're doing well. Now, I'll be right back, and then we will check some clips. In the meantime, Manatee restored. Alright, I'm back. This Metricon says, Black Mage Burst only crams Xenos in optimizing scenarios. Hoarding Xenos for buffs is like #1 new Black Mage mistake. Indeed. Black Mage is like... I've said this before. Black Mage... due to the way that its 2-minute burst, quote-unquote, is put down ley lines. And then it has amplifier to give it 1 polyglot. Like, I mean, that's not really a burst cooldown, is it? And ley lines isn't always useful at the time where the 2-minute burst takes place. Like, sometimes there's a high mobility section, and it would actually be smarter to not put down ley lines at that moment. It means that, largely speaking, Black Mage doesn't really have a consistent 2-minute burst. Besides, because ley lines has charges, Black Mage can just choose to not do it and just hold it for later. Which means that Black Mage is like pretty unique among jobs in Final Fantasy XIV in that you can, as possibly the only job, completely forget that the 2-minute burst exists and just sit there listening to payphone, just mash fire 4, and it's fine. And your damage will be fine. Just make sure to click your cooldowns at some point. But it doesn't have to be on the 2-minute burst. And basically no other job can do that to that extreme, because every single other job has something that just reels them back in with, well, technically if you use both of these in the burst, then it's technically a gain, and if you use this in the burst, it's technically a gain. Like, White Mates can use Blood Lilies when they need to as a mobility option. Yeah, but if you hold one for the burst, Sage can use Phlegm as they please. Well, technically if you use both of them in the burst, and so on and so forth. Machinist, well, you have Wildfire and Barrel Stabilizer. Machinist has a little bit of a, you kind of make your burst, you design it. You have a lot of options because it doesn't like inherently have a clear correct answer. But basically, Black Mage is a very interesting one to point to because it's the perfect example of, technically, not all jobs are stuck in the 2-minute burst. Exactly, Sally. It was something like that in the last raid tier as well for me. Was on Sugar Riot, fight starts, I use both my ley lines relatively early. And then I just don't ley lines until, like, ad phase. Because the whole desert phase, there's too much mobility needed. So it's not happening there. And when you're getting shoved around, it's not happening there. But a Pixelmancer would just have to go and figure it out in the desert phase, I think. Also, hey, Switch. Hope you're doing well. And that is true. Lots of folks wants lots of things, and you can't please them all. The key there is trying to please the ones that quote-unquote matter the most. Who's that? Good question. It is worth mentioning on that one, Stainless, just last thing, that the whole 90, 200, 120, and 180 stuff is that before they made everything 60 or 2 minutes, apparently the story goes, and this is like another thing where it was like the problem was manifesting and then things changed before it became a big problem, is that apparently leading up to Endwalker, where they, you know, normalized all the buffs, it had started to become more and more prevalent that that Party Finder, like, it was mostly a statics thing, but supposedly it was starting to seep into Party Finder of, no, actually, you need this exact comp because buffs align better in it. Which, like, one expansion prior in Stormblood, this was also seeping into Party Finder, where it was mostly a statics thing of, well, because of like piercing resistance down, you need a Dragoon if you have a ranged physical at all. And if you have a Dragoon, then both ranged physicals are actually probably better than a mage. So, and basically Shadowbringers comes, whoop, take toy away from the kids before they ruin it. Then Endwalker comes, whoop, take toy away before the kids ruin it. Like both times. In a way, I can't possibly speak to how big the problem was. But that's this, as far as I know, that is how the story goes. And it's difficult to find history on this stuff. But essentially, when the cooldowns were much more varied, players found a different way to optimize it. And the question is, ultimately, do we care? That's ultimately, that's the actual question we need to ask, is do we care? Because, as you can see, make all the cooldowns equal, we'll find something else to optimize. It kind of depends on the content laid to sleep, but I do believe that in optimizing groups, Pictomancer is still the strongest. But it has been knocked down a few pegs. But see, the thing is there, Sally, that it doesn't matter if that's what it's balanced for. So, I keep saying last thing, I mean it this time. You may know the whole players optimize the fun out of things. It's a longer quote, that's not exactly how it goes, but there's some truth to it, that players will find the most optimal way to do a thing and then do it. And it will probably not be fun unless the design made it fun. Sidetrack to that is that, so Fellowship game that some of you might know is basically a dungeon spammer game, and you then progress into high difficulties. If you know what Mythic Plus is, it's basically that. At the highest difficulty, it's basically like when you can get the best gear. The optimal way to grind gear is to just do the lowest difficulty of this section of content. Just spam that until you have mostly full best in slot. And the funny thing is, if you climb higher, then the amount of resources you get and the possibility of an item having a socket or something, like a random chance for it to be better, which is something you need for it to be optimal, actually, increases. Which means that technically the developers made it in a way that it is probably worthwhile to just keep climbing until you can't, and then just progress from there. Despite that, players determined that the most efficient way to grind gear is just spam the lower difficulty stuff that is easier to farm repeatedly. And the funny thing, the reason why I'm thinking about this is because just the other day I saw people complain that the developers designed it to be optimal that way, when technically the developers added incentive to climb. Players just determined that they don't care. I was like, K-Dub, hope you're doing well. Now, let's see here. I have a lot of clips. If you know that I have a clip from you, or you're pretty sure that you do, make yourself known in the chat. If you know your name is different on Discord and the particular stream that you're on, maybe make sure that you clarify that that's you. Because I do know that there are some that adjust their names. Say Crusher, hope you're doing well. See, we have Yannick, we have Zaf, we have Stainless. I think Zav had one from last time that I didn't get to. And Zav said that he has a little bit of a back end, or like has to go at some point. So how about we start with that? We have a T9S clear. Hey Connie, hope you're doing well. Oh, I do agree with that, Cat. And I will also add that my point is more that they technically made it perfectly viable to not farm in that way. And possibly better to farm it by climbing. It's just easier to spam. So people don't even explore that possibility. I'd also say the game doesn't well explain that these probabilities increase as you go higher, so why would you? I have a note on that, Stainless. I do know. We will probably also get to that. I'll try my best. You know what? I initially thought it would be weird because I believe Zav often doesn't have music on, but this cam piano is maybe a bit much. I'll say Neo Grainer. Hope you're doing well. So by the way, I have it in the window instead of full screen because sometimes people pop in the middle and are very confused because they think I'm the one playing. Surely the YouTube outline makes it clear. Maybe it's better that we do it anyway. It would be funnier. How about that? Because it's funny. I'll look very serious and very intense. New alt? Absolutely. So, as I recall, I recall the ultimate version has this whole thing where you have to pay attention to words. Is this a thing in turn 4? That's just what I could have had the stream in full screen and pretend I'm Danish. You just have to know. Oh, even better. That's fantastic. You just have to know. I love that type of mechanic. I say, Shaq, hope you're doing well. Show hands and shows how good you are playing. You're playing telepathically. Yeah, exactly. You know, it is certainly a choice to play Reaper at level 50 in level 50 content. Not anything bad about it. I might have done it too. Hey, Mud Skipper, hope you're doing well. We are reviewing, we're watching Zav's clear of a T9S. The second Coil of Bahamut on Savage is a Nail Vandana's fight. I can't recall, is this blind prog? Oh, like, what's the deets? What's the details? I might have had it in a note. Let me see. Not blind, really. Okay. Is this the fight where Summoner's Titan could tank something back in the day? You just have to know what he's doing is old Savage, though. You know, the funny thing there is that I feel like a large part of that, like the reason why it becomes everything is like that is because of a lot of how a lot of mechanics don't show a telegraph or anything. I say, Dyson, hope you're doing well. Get to see how poor Reaper is at level 50. Reaper's really is actually pretty strong at level 50. The problem is more that they have like 6 attacks technically. 3 of them being their 1-2-3 combo. And 1 of them being their ranged attack. And 1 of them being Death Design. And 1 of them being a spender. Which, on the positive end means that you get to just, like, you just get to press the damage button. But they have just enough that they can technically serve up a burst. Like, they can technically serve up a burst because they can hold 50 gauge. I'll say, Solon, hope you're doing well. And yeah, exactly, Soren. It's kind of the same there. Mobs in deep dungeons just going, well, you're just supposed to know that, or it one-shots you. Maybe Titan could tank that guy. I do think like a random point on the boss mechanics don't show telegraphs in Savage angle is that any of you that have tanked Dawntrail Extreme, have you done Dawntrail normal since that? Because is it just me, or is the fact that the tank cone is completely visible as it's spinning around on normal extremely disorienting, or what? I feel like I remember seeing this before, and I think we may have seen T9 normal, but there's so much going on that I can never remember exactly. It might have been an unsynced run. It was disorienting the first time, but it's extra disorienting when you realize that it's not as bad when it's in extreme, where there is no indicator. Mudskipper says, is there any issues with damage output when a high level mob gets level synced? Level job gets level synced? I assume you lose out on a lot of damage abilities. Regularly, jobs that start at a higher level when synced down are stronger than the jobs that actually start at the lower level. But it depends on the job how big of a difference it is. For example, in level 50 and below level 50, Viper and Reaper are often extremely strong and easier to play than the jobs that actually start below that level. And jobs swing a lot in performance at different levels, yeah. But commonly, the new jobs tend to be strong when synced down rather than weak. With few exceptions. But it varies. I'm just gonna say, at level 50, oh boy, there was an inball there. At level 50, a black mage can, emphasis on can, compete with like the jobs that get synced down to that level. But it's a random chance because the black mage needs to be exceedingly lucky for that to work consistently. Also, oof. Yazzle says, was that a planned heal LB? Was it tough? I saw there was 3 deaths. It could have been that your strategy was that they die. It was not a strategy. Well, that makes it a very, very nice heal LB save. I'll say what's really, really difficult in following a fight like this is definitely that there's a lot of debuffs and a lot of icons that is like, I don't know what that is because I haven't done this fight synced. But congrats! Yeah, Very nice. Late to Sleep says 0.5 should be the last one for the Mega Wings, right? Yes. I only have wings from up to EX3 and only have one clear in EX4. Do you think people will be back in Party Finder of the old ones? No. Not like not any more than they are now, I don't think. So best you can do is try to make Party Finder and get people or find people that want to join you. The amount of clears you need also makes it pretty beneficial to make a make a temporary static for it or something like that. No idea what's going on. Have fun with the Criterion clip. I know, right? I will say that my point was more that, as I think Sally mentioned, the older fights are much less clear on what is going on. There's barely any indicators for attacks like tank busters. Exactly. And icons for specific mechanics are more random, it feels like. But very nice. I do like how there was a lot of chaos going on, and I think a decent amount of reses, and it still worked out. Like, I know that means that it isn't balanced to be super hard, you know, blah blah, because it should be so cutting edge difficult that, like, if you have any reses, it's a problem. But I feel like that leads to a much cooler finish. That you're like, oh, it's a real journey to get to the clear, because you have the death, you have the recovery, and all these things going on, and you can still win. Also, Antimony Soul, hope you're doing well, and thank you so much. I'm glad to hear that. That's awesome. But yeah, back then, there wasn't a lot of things standardized. In fact, you can still see this a little bit in Heavensward when they started to have, like, more regularly occurring markers for stuff, but they kept having markers that were, like, thematically fitting, which meant that you were like, oh, this is a spread marker. Why? Because that mechanic is a spread, and that blue marker is because the attack is blue. That is also a spread. Why? Well, the attack is red, so the orange marker. You're just supposed to know that. Oh, actually, that orange marker is a stack. Why? Because the attack is red, and that marker says that stuff is happening. Like, a lot of the markers back then were just, thing is happening. What you can try late to sleep, I don't know how much success you can get with it, but you can try and ask around. For instance, there's the community Discord. You can try and see if you can find some like-minded people to join you. But I can't really offer much else than that. To try and find people to go with. Also, AK97, hope you're doing well. Yeah, the visual of the stack at the end of Circus Tower used to be a very ominous black circle, I believe. And then eventually they changed it to actually have a visible stack marker. That stack teaches Sprouts a really bad habit that they can stack stacks. The funny thing is, the reason why you can't stack stacks normally has nothing to do with the stack and more to do with how they choose to make multiple stacks at the same time. Like, basically the reason why you can stack these stacks in Circus Tower is because there isn't a debuff or anything associated with it. The reason why you can't stack most stacks is because these stacks are usually accompanied by a vulnerability debuff that makes you take lethal damage if you get hit by 2 of them. That's usually how it works. That's also why I said jokingly that it would be funny if they added something like that to the Circus Tower one. What's even more cursed is that in E12N, Eden's Promise, there is a stack, or there's a pair stack, or two stacks, sorry, there's a pair of stacks that you can stack because they don't have punishment for stacking them. And it's like the second or third time in the game that it happens. For reasons. Next. Yes, during the ads. Exactly, Grimmy. Let's check out the stainless clip. Now that we're already in the... let's check out the past. Is there a specific point for this stainless? Like a specific time? And then he did it again in M2S for no good reason. Oh yeah, indeed. Let's focus on something slightly further forward in time. Let me just fix this. Nope, that's as good as it gets. Hey Mina, hope you're doing well. Ah, yes, this is also actual Shadowbringers. Because the inner release is on a 90-second cooldown. Ah, yes, the circle AoE. It doesn't apply a vulnerability as far as I can see, so if you can tank it, you just tank it. That one applies a vulnerability. ZLTC, hope you're doing well. Soil is so small. Indeed, Zipzap. If I recall correctly, they increased the size of Sacred Soil like multiple times in Endwalker. It's really funny because I remember when Sage got added to the game that one thing that I really liked was that it meant that I had Sacred Soil that you couldn't step out of. Because I played Scholar a lot in Shadowbringers. Nowadays, the size... Oh, again, why dodge? just invuln it, I guess, Lamau. 2 vuln stacks, who cares? Oh, also, notice, guys, did you know that timers on buffs and debuffs in the party list is a newer addition? Yeah, nowadays, Sacred Soil is so big that it is actually it's a challenge to actually step out of Sacred Soil. Ah, the good old Dragoon Tether. And here we once again see why there are damage downs. Yep. Gazel misses the TP bar. You know, the really funny bit here, I think, is... I'm just gonna rewind this bit. You can see, I believe, at this very moment, you should be able to evaluate where the safe spot will be. I'm pretty sure. Which means that at this point, they could have just gone, like, based on what I'm seeing here, I think it's possible the safe spot is, like, south? Somewhere south, somewhere off screen, because there is a safe spot. These fireballs are getting kicked around. I think this one kicks it over there. Maybe not. This one is getting kicked over there. There is a way to solve this at this point that is correct, where you don't take any damage from the fireballs exploding. But because it doesn't do enough damage, the solution is... who cares? Just go north. And I remember that because I procced this one when it was current. Very late, but technically did. And I remember having to call out the way we went. The dodge. Because we respected the mechanic. We didn't realize, we didn't even consider it an option to just tank it. But that's what happens if the mechanic isn't threatening enough, is that players may just find that you don't actually have to respect the mechanic. Sailor says, this is what I think is the whole reason we have damage downs this fight and how people handled it. There was, I don't know exactly when, but there was definitely, as Sally also says, there was a bit of a turning point where they went, okay, let's try and give them damage downs as punishment instead. Players threw a fit, and then they, like, dialed it back a bit, only to realize that, well, if we don't give you damage downs, then you don't care. So, damage downs it is. Like, it is pretty funny, because I have previously... Oh, we have a dead Dragoon. I have previously argued that sometimes, like, I think it's more fun to do the fight correctly, quote-unquote. The problem with saying that is, of course, that gives the impression that, you know, eating the damage, or that eating the damage is incorrect, or that there is a specifically most correct strategy. But I would say that, for instance, just ignoring a mechanic and just dumping your face into it and getting a Vuln stack does feel like the game is all actually outright telling you that is wrong. Like, that there is wrong. I feel like that one is fair to say that doing the mechanic correctly is something you can say to that. Hey, Crow Overdose. Hope you're doing well. Like, I absolutely see that it doesn't change anything. Like, the reward is the same, right? And if it's easier to do it in a different way, then why not just do it like that? Right? That's just how I think about it sometimes. Ooh, that's a stretchy dragon sight. Whoa. No damage. DPS says people throwing a fit about damage down shows that it's a good enough punishment. See, the thing is, the way that it can be interpreted is, one way is, wah, we don't get to ignore mechanics. Wah. Like, that's one way to look at it. Another way is, technically, tanking the Vuln stack and just healing through it is a strategy. Determining that it is easier to take the hit is a strategy. the developer saying, nope, actually, you die if you do that, is basically the game saying, nope, it's not. And some mechanics do that. But if a mechanic lets you live it, but says that there's only one correct answer, anyways, then some players might feel like their creative freedom, quote-unquote, is taken away. Zip Zap says it could also be funny, instead of a damage down, you eat like a fat 12-second stun or something crazy like that. Oh, they've tried that too, but usually sparingly. Say, Wahujo, hope you're doing well. A good puzzle only has one solution. Well, see, the key there, Wahijo, is that while some view boss fights as puzzles, many view them as boss fights. Which means that one might argue that a good boss fight has more than one solution. A boss fight where, like, a good puzzle only has one solution, but it also usually has very few starting states, right? Commonly one starting state that you then find the solution from, right? But in 14, a boss fight not only gives you the freedom to choose how you want to approach the fight, but should also give you the option to choose how, both how you start the fight and how you approach the fight. Some mechanics have multiple solutions. But a good puzzle, I can agree to some extent, probably only has one good solution, or has one solution. But I also think it depends on how you get to that one solution. Because a good puzzle only has one solution also matches with the boss died, right? If we imagine like the saying with a good puzzle only has one solution can, for instance, be applied directly to, you know, like brick puzzles. You're putting together an image. If the puzzle has two ways to be solved, then it means that you could arrive at a technically correct solution, like all of the pieces are there, and they are all placed correctly, like they're not placed in a jank where they don't actually apply, but the image is clearly not correct. That's, you know, that's a problem. But I feel like that's like, if we're going to compare that to Final Fantasy XIV here, that would be like if there was a way to get your loot without the boss dying because of a bug. The image is correct if you squint a bit. Now, there were church bells going off. I live near a church. I don't know why they went off. That's a really weird time for the bells to go off. Sarah says, my argument to my static to not cheese a strat was thus. We specifically do minimum item level no Echo Savage to get as close to the intended challenge as possible. Cheesing a strat feels like missing the point there. I agree. That makes sense. That's pretty reasonable. To extend on that, an interesting thing, which is, it's a difficult conversation to have, I feel, because on the one hand, obviously you're trying your best, it's the hardest there is. On the other hand, it could be harder, is I feel like for a while now, what often happens in the aftermath of a world first race on a Savage raid tier is that the raiders say it was too easy. What I would add to that is that at present, the final boss of the raid tier on the hardest difficulty is balanced such that you can beat it in crafted gear, or so it claims. Now the question is, when they design this fight, how much do they actually assume that you bring? Because when you toggle this and this, I assume that what you get is that. And food buffs and potions. Right? If that plus food and potions isn't enough to win, then that isn't the minimum item level required. But if the minimum item level required to actually be capable of beating it is 760, for instance, then that's a whole different conversation. But what I do want to add to this is that at present, because Savage doesn't release the same week as the raid tier itself anymore, means that you have 1, 2, maybe 3 tombstone gear pieces, which means your item level average is maybe 72 by the time you enter. And by the time you get here, there will be, as Sally kind of pointed out, someone with a lot more than that. Which is to say, due to the way Final Fantasy XIV works, the hardest version of a raid tier is not the version where you do everything you can to maximize your damage and then you enter, or maximize your gear and then you enter. Which means that the most likely version that most players are going to experience in the first week and their first go at it is not truly the hardest version. Many players will never experience the truly hardest version. If you have done as much as glance at a boss guide for a Savage encounter, you have already lost the opportunity to have the hardest version of this boss encounter. Because presumably, the hardest version of this boss encounter, I would guess, has to be blind, no third-party tools, technically. And this is the big one. This is like the haymaker coming out of nowhere. Boom! You have to use the weakest jobs in every role. Which means you have to bring Summoner. Circle back to the start when we talked about Summoner earlier in the stream. Wow! Amazing. Okay, hope you're doing well. We're talking about the hardest version of a boss fight. Not anyone in particular. I used M12S as a random example. But yeah, basically, the hardest version is 8 players who've never played 14 before and are blindfolded. I mean, within reason, what would be the weakest team? That can kind of depend on the fight. But yeah, essentially, within reason, the hardest version of the fight would be week 1. So you have currently relevant gear, right? Minimum item level, no echo. Obviously, no echo part doesn't matter because no echo isn't applied yet. And you're using the weakest job in every role to really, really emphasize the weaknesses of the jobs. And hypothetically, you don't even use food or potions, but I'm pretty sure that the minimum item level syncing assumes that you're using those. That's the difficult part. The reason why I want to highlight this is when people are disappointed that the fights aren't hard enough when they're new, I feel like so the reason is that obviously Final Fantasy XIV is an MMO, and in MMOs it's kind of common that you optimize a lot of things, right? That makes sense. That's how the game works. All the number go up. That's how the game works. If it doesn't work like that, then it's a different kind of game most of the time. So it makes sense that players approach content like this. It perfectly makes sense. I'm not saying that they're doing it wrong. But what I am saying is how many of you opened Hollow Knight Silksong and just randomly decided to never use any upgrades the whole game? For the challenge on your first playthrough. How many of you opened Expedition 33 and decided that you're going to do every fight with only Gustav and no Luminous and no Pictus for the challenge? How many of you decided to play your first playthrough of a game on the hardest possible imaginable difficulty on your first go? Cat says, I opened Soup and on hard solo. Fair. Jack says, you in Expedition 33? Well, I played it on Expert, but I'm using Luminous and Pictus and using all of the characters, and I'm optimizing to the extreme that arguably I'm actually like squeezing it to make it easier, even though I'm playing on Expert. Basically, the point I'm going for here is going into the new Savage tier and expecting it to be the hardest version of the fight you're ever going to experience, while doing everything you can to make it easier for yourself, is maybe missing something. And Asymmetricon does highlight an interesting point, because the comparison point here is World of Warcraft, and in World of Warcraft, the new raid tier is designed. A new raid tier usually has a lot of bosses. It can have 12 bosses, it could have 15 bosses sometimes. It can have a lot of bosses. And that means that there's enough of a journey that you could absolutely get a lot of gear by the time you hit the last one. So they balance it so that the last one expects you to have some of that gear. And they might overtune it a bit because they want it to last. They want it to be exceptionally hard. They don't want it to be beatable week 1 in the equivalent of crafted gear in 14. Which is not exactly the same in WoW. WoW also has PTRs. Yeah, they do. There is indeed a joke that the testers of the game is the players themselves. It is indeed a thing. Asymmetricon says, do people expect it to be the hardest, or do they just expect it to be harder than it is now? That is also another difficult conversation, because I put out a video called something about something to the effect of the expertise problem. Some of you may have seen it. And this also sort of circles back to the Gordius problem. I have watched, this might not apply to every group, right? But I have watched actual Heavensward footage of Alexander raids, like Savage. And I sit there thinking, why are they not using that cooldown? Why is their GZD drifting? What are they doing? Like, they're making a lot of mistakes that we don't make in Savage difficulty groups now. And if we do, then it's obvious that that's the reason. Good luck, Grimmy. Crow Overdose says, as someone who has never done Savage or Ultimates, how do you get the confidence to even try? Have you done Extremes? Like Extreme Trials? Just, I'm not saying as, that's how you do it. I'm just asking, have you done Extreme Trials while you're giving this while you're asking this question? This Metricon says, I think 14 has a problem, like almost all things with more than one player, where you can't have a game that satisfies the entire spectrum of ability and desire. So no matter what, either the Savage tier will be hard enough for the people who want it to be hard, or reasonable to beat for the people who don't want that. Correct. I agree. Absolutely. Part of the problem in 14 is that the best players have reached a point where they're so good that for them to be truly challenged, not a lot of players are going to be able to truly, like, to be reliably able to beat that hard content. I imagine. And the question is then, is it better to, like, not satisfy them? Crow Overdose says I've done Extreme Trials unsynced. Right. So the way you gain the confidence to try the hard content is, and I know this is a disappointing answer, but I'm not kidding, I'm not messing with you. The answer is just go and try. That's it. How did you gain the confidence to tank dungeons with other players? How did you get the confidence to heal dungeons with other players? How did you gain the confidence to run a dungeon with other players at all? You just went and did it. At some point you might have done it because you didn't even realize that it could be scary, so you just went for it and it was fine. But you have to go and try to gain that confidence. As I've said before, the way that you get the confidence to not be worried about tanking a dungeon is on your first dungeon. If you make a mistake, then it is a mistake in 100% of the content you've done as a tank, so that's really scary. Once you've done 10 dungeons, making a mistake is a little less scary. If you've done 100 dungeons as a tank, it starts to be a drop in the bucket. Like, it's like, yeah, but I did like 90 dungeons and it was fine. The way you get that confidence is just go and try. The worst thing that happens is it doesn't work. Is that it doesn't work out. Like, to call back to Fellowship a bit, when I had to start queuing with randos for the highest difficulty content in that game as a tank, I was scared because I was worried that I'd queue in, I'd do a pull, and people left because I didn't pull big enough, or because I didn't pull the correct thing, or I didn't tank well enough, or whatever. And so far in that context, I haven't had anyone leave. I've done plenty of dungeons. The way you do it is you try. You just have to go and try. That's all you can do. Let's see. I'm just gonna put out the call again that if you have a clip for me that you know that you have posted I haven't reacted to, do let me know that you're here. Especially if if it's not clear that you are. Gazel is here. We could check Gazel's clip. I assume it's kinda short. Is it the whole 5 minutes, Gazel? I imagine Yannick's clip is also kinda short. You're on a car, Yannick? I imagine you meant in, but it's way funnier, the alternative. the last 2 to 3 minutes. So a common thing that Gazelle does when running this specific boss fight is that he calls out what elements are coming. But that's mostly relevant when we get to phase 2. Which is here. Cam Lamau. The Gazelle said that it was harder, I think, to call out the elements in JP. Good luck, Rust. The specific point where the elements matter is that he will do like, he will have line AoEs that expand. And there you kind of need to pay attention. That church is going crazy tonight. Wow. Wait, did the healer just take the tank buster? Someone is either getting married or someone died. Only options. Yeah, I can see that it's a little more riding to get it. A thing you could do for that, Gazelle, is if you know that you do this for this fight and you have an expectation that you land in this duty, is make macros for the elements. That could help. Let's hold with the Yannick clip if he's car surfing right now. Yeah, I do realize the walk didn't get a lot of walk, but we do also have a lot of talk, and we do also have a lot of clips. Whoops. Let's talk the walk. It says the healer didn't use any actions after res. Like a pro, so only got knockback? Ah, okay. I was wondering if they just tanked that damage and they just barely survived. I didn't really notice. I was too focused on who's he gonna rescue. Don't want to spam the chat with calling out using 3 different messages. It might take quite some macro slots for all the combinations. No. And if you don't want to have it fill up your hotbars... Good luck, Zaf. Can you make the icon a fire crystal? Something like that? Nope. Mikaelia, hope you're doing well. Oh yeah, fantastic. You could do this, Guzzle. And then you just, like, when the mechanic is happening, you just... And just bing, bong, bong. I'm not sure what the command is, but it kind of depends, I guess. But yeah, I don't recommend making a quadrillion different combos to print out the all the elements combined for specific sequence, Guzzle. Just make 6 macros, 1 for each element. You're on a train but in a car. True. Which is also weird because you could be on a train. Wouldn't sending 3 lines of call-out messages for one mechanic that some people don't even need be too annoying, though? What's that? Like... Is the reason why it's harder is because you're writing all 3 elements in one line? Let me put it like this, Gazel. Ask yourself, if someone wrote mechanically relevant information in the party chat and spent multiple lines on it, would you mind? Would it be a problem? Kat says, I would, but I'm a weirdo. So I understand that when Sip and I are going absolutely blasting crazy, doing something like well, I'm not in a party, so I'll just send an error message. But, you know, doing something like this, when pairs are coming up on Dawntrail, Cat is just losing his mind. Like, Argh! Yeah, part of the problem is also that making macros for every single combination is, well, let's just say that you would need 120 macro slots for that. 120, I repeat, 120 macros to cover every single combination of 3 elements out of 6. A little less. Thank you, DPS. A little less if you account for repeats. But you could, of course, also just make it a party message. But I just think that's not something you need to worry about. People are spending that precious chat log to send limit break macros. Like, I think... Why do you have this warrior memes macro? Because I used it to demonstrate how macros work. I will choose to be silent. Basically, the way this macro works is that if you press it during the GCD, depending on how close to the GCD is ready, you press it, it will use a random action down this list. Never got rid of it? Well, I have so much space. I also have this. Now that is a macro. And it's this. Anyway, I don't think it's a big deal if you just send like 3 messages for 3 things. You could also just do it in party chat to not annoy the alliance at large, but troll macros until 2025. Yeah, you're right. Nowadays we use strategy boards. No, that's the cool new thing. Has Shaman returned? Yes, I got a real strategy board yesterday and was very confused. Where's the joke? What do you mean joke? I don't know. I believe Liam's clip was more like a very short trick. Was all to benefit from. I think we can check that one out. I believe it is this one. The trick is how to swap unique items with to have different materia sets. It's very short because it's very simple, and I do get the trick. So the problem being addressed is if you have a unique item, then obviously you can't have 2 of them. But your Shogobo can have one, and each of your retainers can have one, and you can have one. But how do you swap them around? Like that. You just make sure that you're swapping specifically the same item. You have to do it precisely. Otherwise, you will have, you know, a moment where you have both items on you or both of them on the Shogobo. But it does make it very tedious if you want more than 2. Right, I'll be right back. And we'll see if we can get a few more clips. Is that console friendly? I mean, yes. You just use your this, grab, and go over in the other menu. That should be possible. Anyway, I'll be right back. And in the meantime, manatee restored. Ta-da! I have returned. I think the real reason why I have that warrior memes one is just because I forgot. So I'll delete it now. There you go. I also still have macros from the first raid tier that we haven't used since. We could check out Eevee's clip from another from another merchant's tale, although maybe we have to do that one later because it's still very early. Some people might still want to have a chance. Oh, Shaman is here. Well, we could check that one then. Let's see. It's this one. So, a quick pro tip is the Stone Sky Sea, of course, doesn't fix your MP for some reason. So what you have to do as a black mage after you've done a try is switch to Umbral Ice and then Umbral Soul to fix it, or just, you know, switch out of Astral Fire and wait. Otherwise you run into the problem of going in with not maximum MP. So first tip, by the way, is zoom out. Zoom out. So now that I see that you didn't have full MP, I do realize why you used Lucid Dreaming. That explains a lot. The clip froze. You just try that again. That scared me a lot. Don't know why Media Player is not working on this. Yeah, I tried to open it with VLC, but it didn't let me. Pro tip. Just post your clip to YouTube for Shaman. Then we'll know that it works. We try something else. It's a WebM. It's okay, Shaman. But just, now you know. It's a lot easier. Right, so that was the opener. Let me just roll it back and then just point out the specific mistakes. It's not nearly as bad as I initially thought. So you can swift cast to get that Fire 4. However, swift casting that Fire 4, the only thing that it accomplishes is allowing you to triple cast. And of course ley lines. Then this Fire 4 allows you to potion. This Fire 4 accomplishes nothing. And this Fire 4 accomplishes nothing. And this Fire 4 needed an instant cast. Which I know sounds really strange when I say they accomplish nothing. What you could do is, with this specific opener, just to give an example rooted in what we have here, is that could have been a triple cast. Because the triple cast would already allow you to use ley lines and potion here if that's what you want. I haven't gotten there yet. Guys, I haven't gotten there yet. So you could have swift casted and then just, Fire 4, ley lines, potion. You could also triple cast ley lines, potion. If you wanted to be at a specific timing, you could also, just go thunder, amplify, triple cast, Fire 4, ley lines, potion. Like, it doesn't have to be immediately there, but all you need is to make sure you use your instant cast to drag the instant cast opportunity to where you need it. So if you specifically want ley lines and potion to happen like a specific number of GCDs later, you can do that. Another thing, if we just continue forward, because like this is pretty minor stuff, right? Like it's just you didn't need to swift cast there. Like that one was kind of wasted. This one here, you're clipping the GCD, because that Fire 4 needed the instant cast. Like basically, that's where you actually needed to still be instant casting. The reason why it needed it is because you can't weave that after Fire 4. Fire 4's cast time is too long to properly mana font. What you can do here is the first option is after this Fire 4. So this one you're casting here, the 5th one, you use Xenoglossy. That one is instant, so you can mana font after that. And then continue, and it's fine. Another option that you can do, which I may need something like this to write out. It's a little bare bones, but oh boy, I've used this recently apparently. Oh, that is an opener. Yep, that's what I do. Sometimes. Sometimes I swift cast or triple cast as I need to weave more things. But what you can do is you can go Fire 3 and Thunder. And then just Fire 4 straight. Just straight up Fire 4. That's okay. And then you go boom with Xenoglossy into triple cast, for instance, and ley lines. Well, to be fair, you'd still have amplifier there, right? At the very least, you could also have ley lines here. But hypothetically, if you wanted to if you wanted to do this, like you want to have your potion and ley lines around here, you can do that. And then, like, the triple cast covers that one, and that one. So you need one more, which you can solve with a cheeky little swift cast, Fire 4, Mana Font. The key is when you do, like, basically, you only have in that opening sequence, you have a thunder cast and a Xenoglossy cast, which are instant. If you want to drag that being instant to something else that comes up later, then you have to use triple cast and swift casts in sequence to maintain it until the thing happens where you actually need the instant. The way I prefer to do it is that I will use I will just use swift cast or triple cast like around here to get all the instants that I need. And then I'll just use Xenoglossy Mana Font and then continue from there. But I kind of freestyle a little bit on my openers. A little bit. But I do something very close to the classic 5-7. Which is like the very, very rough outline of that is you do this. And then, like, somewhere in there, you add Thunder, and you add Ley Lines, and you add triple cast as you need it. It's very flexible. But the thing that you can't do, or you shouldn't do in your opener, like, the thing is you can do this, like, if you're like, oh, I actually wanted to Mana Font there, but I don't have an instant, you can just click Mana Font. That's okay. You can do that. If you plan to use Mana Font there, you're clipping the GCD by like 0.2 seconds under like really good connection. Something like that. It's not very big. But if it's your opener, it's the first like 30 seconds of the fight. That one, you should be able to nail that one. And yes, as Symmetricon says, we used to hard clip, like we used to just full send, go Fire 3, and then Thunder had a cast time of 2.5, I think. Cast that, and then click triple cast. Or after a Fire 4, like, because, like, it's more so you have better options, so don't do it. But the simplest version to solve, like, the simplest way to solve it is just do this. This fixes the Mana Font. You grab this and put that, I don't know, here. Alongside your amplifier, I guess. Rug. And then you can ley lines here. Alongside a potion. This is going to be hard for me to place. That's a solution. And if you actually needed to use Addle or something, and replace that that swift cast with a triple cast, and then you can Addle here, or you could Addle here, like just shove other things down the way. Gedl says, is there any case where you'd want to use Paradox after Mana Font and cast Flare to compensate for not enough MP for 7 Fire 4s? There are cases for that, but it comes down to like needing extra mobility. But as far as I know, you don't need that. So that that's potentially a skill issue thing. But that's the starting point, right? Let's continue. It's a really minor thing. Let me just also just quickly rewind here and say, I'm wondering why you're Xenoglossy there. But yeah, as I said, Xenoglossy is very good for weaving things. So like in your opener, you optimally use Xenoglossy at a point where like you needed it. Like for instance, right there, right here is a very good time to lay down another ley line if you don't need to wait. Like if you actually wanted it there, that's a very good time to do it. If you wanted it later, fair enough, but like that's a pretty good spot. You just chain it into the next ley line. For the pawn, I think is the only reason I think I did that. Yeah, see, exactly. And the key here is that this very moment you have your pot, you have your ley lines, raid buffs should be going. So this is also a good time to Xenoglossy. And then you have the Flare Star. And there's the Xenoglossy, and then you do Despair. I don't know what you checked there, but I guess there's some flipping menus. And here... Wait, where did your other triple cast go? When did you use that? What? You can't weave that there either. Fire Force cast time is too long. And also... Why? Is there an option for cross hotbars to show all pages at all times? It should be an option, yes, and I do recommend it. You have some cooldowns you can't see. And that was also unnecessary. So I just want to quickly go over a few things, Shaman. In your demonstration here, you're using instant casts on Fire 4 and Blizzard 4 as if there is a benefit to doing that. I don't know if that's the reason. But Fire 4's cast time is shorter than the recast time, which means that instant casting Fire 4 doesn't... Like, it makes the cast happen instantly. It makes the damage apply sooner. And it means you can move and weave stuff while doing it. But if the only thing you're going to do, hypothetically, is it... If the only thing you're going to do with it is stand there and cast it and do nothing else, then instant casting Fire 4 doesn't do anything. I thought at the time it made things move faster. Back in the day, when Fire 4's cast time was longer than the recast time, triple casting Fire 4 was a damage gain. But it's not anymore. The same applies for Blizzard 4. Instant casting it doesn't do anything. Well, that's not too bad, is it, Tom? It's still a damage gain if you're auto-attacking? I mean, sure, it's gaining you, like, less than 1 damage. But the reason why I'm highlighting it, Shaman, is because I don't know if you've seen my Is Black Mage Actually Hard video from somewhat recently. The thing I refer to as UI1 B3 Swiftcast is at max level, the primary way arguably, on single target, the only way to flip a swift cast or triple cast into a damage gain. At lower levels, there's more things you can do, which are cursed in their own right, that are also covered in the video. The UI1B3 swift cast, I'm gonna give it very briefly, because now that I mention it, I have to explain it, is because Blizzard 3 has a cast time longer than its recast time. But when you're casting it from Astral Fire 3, then its cast time is cut in half. But when you cast Blizzard 3 from Astral Fire 3, it's also doing 30% less damage. So if you just cast Blizzard 3 from Astral Fire 3, you're getting 30% less damage than it says. But because you're like, the thing that makes it worth it is that the cast time is shorter, which is good. But because the last spell you're casting anyway in the Astral Fire is Despair or some other instant cast, you have the space to weave Swift Cast or Triple Cast and Transpose. And then you instant cast Blizzard 3, and because you're casting Blizzard 3 in Umbral Ice 1, it's not doing reduced damage. It's doing full damage, but its cast time is much longer, but because you have Swift Cast, the cast time is irrelevant. I'm mainly mentioning this because basically the mistake you made at the Blizzard 3 was that you Swift casted the Blizzard 4 instead of the Blizzard 3. And it's also because if you're already in the routine of trying to turn your Swift Cast and Triple Cast into a damage gain, then point Blizzard 3 in Umbral Ice is the damage gain you're looking for. It's the only one, but it is one. Another trick, I'm just going to rewind to the first time you did this. Is that paradox, you needed that one, is... You know how Fire 3 has the same problem, quote unquote, that Blizzard 3 has. That it does less damage if you use it from ice, and it does 30% less damage. So what you commonly do is, at level 100, and also level 90, because you have Paradox, is if you have Firestarter, which is the thing that makes Fire 3 free and instant, then you go, like when you go into Umbral Ice, you go Blizzard 3, Blizzard 4, and you just do bam bam. And if you have an instant cast, you of course used a Swift Cast and a Transpose to get more damage out of Blizzard 4. But the point is, when you do in Umbral Ice, you go Blizzard 3, Blizzard 4, Paradox. And the reason why you go Blizzard 3, Blizzard 4, Paradox is because Paradox being instant means that you can click Transpose. Switch to Astral Fire. If you have a Firestarter proc, you can just click Fire 3 there and it'll do more damage. And it'll be free and instant. And then you just spam Fire 4, and then you can use your Paradox when you want to. But if you don't have Firestarter, which you wouldn't at the start of a fight, which is right here, what you can do is when you transpose into Astral Fire, you still get a Paradox marker. So you go Ice Paradox, bam, this happens. Transpose, Fire Paradox, bam, this happens again. And now you have a Firestarter, so you can click Fire 3. And now you're in Astral Fire 3 from Astral Fire 1. And then you can spam Fire 4. And the reason why this works is because Paradox does unaspected damage. So it doesn't actually benefit from Astral Fire. Like, I highly recommend you check out that video I made, the Is Black Mage Actually Hard? I also show off something similar in my wacky world of non-standard Black Mage, or whatever I called it. Black Mage Transpose lines. And I think I also explained a little bit of it at high level for my like Black Mage guide itself. Because this specific stuff is like, it's enough gold standard that while it sounds really crazy, if you're like interested in going like long term, like playing Black Mage as your main, this specific trick, and I'm calling it one trick because it's basically like it's the same thing, is you instant cast Blizzard 3, you transpose instant cast Blizzard 3, you transpose and somehow instant cast Fire 3 for free. Either immediately or a moment later. That's basically the gameplay loop of Black Mage. The only time where you're hard casting Blizzard 3 from Fire, as you would call it, is if you needed so many swift casts and triple casts that you don't have any left. Because the damage loss of casting a Blizzard 3 like that normally isn't very big. But casting nothing at some point, where you could have cast something, that's an insurmountable loss. And yeah, there I think you used Fire 3 without transposing. So, let me just rewind to double check whether you actually did that. Yep. So, if you cast Fire 3 from Umbral Ice 3, it does 70% damage. If you had just transposed there and then cast Fire 3, it would have done 140% damage. So basically, by not transposing, you basically lost half of the damage you could have had. So the main things... The main things that I would like to highlight is... And see, the thing is, the UI1B3 Swift casting with the, like, transpose Swift cast Blizzard 3, it's not super important initially. It's something you can learn. The idea of using Ice Paradox, Transpose, and then Fire Paradox into Fire 3, or straight Fire 3 if you have Firestarter, that one is a little bit more important. But the big thing that I think that is important that you take away from this is basically the entirety of Black Mage's toolkit. If a spell has a cast time, then you can't weave something after it. Unless you have to. Like, basically, multiple times in your demonstration, you had 3 polyglots and still chose to swift cast after a Fire 4. I think Strat, or was it Asymmetricon, mentioned earlier today, I can't remember if it was in stream chat or on the Discord, that stockpiling polyglots to like use in the 2-minute burst is like an optimization thing. That's not something that you have to do. Before you're sitting there optimizing around raid buffs, you just use Xenoglossies if you need an instant cast for something. If you just, oh, actually, I want to use ley lines here. I'm just gonna Xenoglossy and ley lines. Oh, actually, my amplifier just came off cooldown. I don't have a paradox or something. I'm just gonna Xenoglossy amplifier. Oh, I just finished my Astral Fire state with Despair, but it's actually too late in the GCD to Mana Font now, so I'll just Xenoglossy and then Mana Font. Like, Xenoglossy is the oops flag when you're learning. Like, if you're not sure what to press, Xenoglossy, if it's glowing, it might not be the thing you should have pressed, but it is always a correct answer. It's not an incorrect answer, let's just say that. And it can enable you to fix mistakes. If you needed to do something, you needed to weave something, you just Xenoglossy weave it now. And yeah, don't save too many of the Xenoglossies. Use them as you need them. Like, case in point, if you're playing speed Black Mage, like if you have a really fast GCD, or your latency is annoying, or mix, then the UI 1B3 Swift cast gets really janky during ley lines, because you can't actually double weave on an instant. So what you'll have to do is do something like Despair, Transpose, Xenoglossy, Swift cast B3. Or Despair, Transpose, Thunder, Swiftcast B3 to make space for it. So, like, use your instant casts to weave. The only exceptions to this, if it has a cast time you can't weave after it, is if you're casting Blizzard 3 from Astral Fire 3, or you're casting Fire 3 from Umbral Ice 3, then their cast time is technically short enough that you can weave something. Except sometimes not during ley lines, and if your spell speed is too high, then also no. Long story short, it's kind of jank, maybe more helpful in lower levels, and because the optimization generally means that you're not casting them like that, they will eventually go out of your repertoire anyways, so maybe don't get used to having them as weaving opportunities. But aside from that, you were doing decently well on the basics. How much time do you need to weave? If your latency is good, then you need approximately 0.7 seconds. Which you may notice is why I said if you cast Fire 4 and then Mana Font, you lose 0.2 seconds. And then you need 0.7 seconds if your connection is really good. So you typically need more. What's the cast time of Fire 3 and Blizzard 3? 3.5 seconds. And then you divide it by 2 when you're in the opposite elements maximum. Which means that they're 1.75. 2.5 minus 1.75 is 0.75. So technically, you have enough time. But if you have a lot of spell speed and in ley lines, then the cast time and the GCD will each get reduced. And because the cast time and GCD will be reduced by a percentage, essentially, but the time you need is static. It means that, as you said, 0.05 seconds of leeway is getting eaten as you make your as you make your GCD faster. Which typically means that already by the time that you're using ley lines, it's too fast. Let me clarify on that one, Asymmetricon. Animation locks are roughly are 0.6 seconds plus your latency plus somewhere around 30 to 50 ms. But it can sometimes be like sometimes you can subtract like 50 ms because game weird. It usually will take that one back later, so it'll add like an extra 50 ms. The reason why I'm saying 0.7 seconds asymmetric on is because when you cast something with a cast time, cast attacks adds an additional 0.1 seconds. There's also a factor based on your FPS. The way that works is that the game will send your actions on the next viable frame, which means that you need, like, for you to cast Fire 4, it needs to be a frame of gameplay on your screen. Which means that sometimes you lose like a fraction of a second to that. But yeah, the reason why Black Mage needs 0.7 seconds to weave something, good night, Connie, is because when they cast something, it takes cast time plus 0.1 seconds before they can weave something. And then the weave takes 0.6 seconds plus your latency plus roughly 30 to 50 ms. Which means if you have an exceptional connection, then you can do it. It discounts support, hope you're doing well. It says big optimization question. Does the balance provide 6 or 3% damage to a miner or botanist? 3%. But you're gonna stop clipping the GCD, Shaman, by simply not trying to weave something at a spot where you can't weave something. And that's the only thing you need there. Is you need to make sure that you're not weaving something in a spot that can't be weaved on. Like, basically, the way that you have to read it is, if you cast something like Fire 4, then you basically have like 2 blanks. Like, if normally we read GCDs, like if you're like spreadsheeting it, we often like go like GCD and then weaves. Some do that at least. Fire 4 takes so long that there's no space after it. Xenoglossy instead has what do we use for that? Has 2 spaces after it where you can do something. A Fire 3 after you're already in Umbral Ice has like, it takes so long that the first weaving opportunity is eaten, but the second one is technically there sometimes. But that's basically how you have to read it, is like every action, every GCD you use, every spell or weapon skill you use has a certain amount of space after it. Like it gets more complicated. There's like timing and all sorts of stuff, but the essential part of Black Mage is that to weave something, you have to use an instant. Otherwise, you can't. How many LBDCs can you weave between Xenoglossies under ley lines? Depends on your spell speed. If your spell speed is slow, or even middling, then 2. If your GCD is really, like if your spell speed is really high, then 1. Shaman says, in your opinion, do you believe speed Black Mage is much better than crit determination directed, or are they minimally different in terms of output? See, the trick there, Shaman, is that you're not choosing between spell speed and all other stats in the game. You're choosing... The reason why you're typically choosing between spell speed or crit... I have multiple videos on how crit works, is because crit has this exponentially scaling effect where the more you have of it, the better it gets. But it starts weaker than the other stats, so you need over a certain amount of crit for crit to be better than the other stats. And if you're focused on spell speed, then crit will typically not reach that breakpoint where it starts to be better. So when you stack spell speed, determination and direct hit become superior stats to prioritize after spell speed. If you prioritize crit, then crit, of course, is already prioritized. But that's the reason. In terms of performance, I believe spell speed has more strength in a vacuum. It's better when you don't have rate buffs to align with necessarily, because crit scales better with that. Spell speed has a more consistent damage output, meaning that out of... Like, if you took any one pull out of 100 attempts, each pull should be reasonably close to each other in performance, because you're less reliant on crit luck. Whereas a crit build is more likely for any one pull to be specifically an outlier, like a significant outlier than the rest. Which is to say, crit has a higher capacity to be lucky and really turn that into value, while spell speed has more consistency in its performance instead. They're both fine to the degree that unless you're trying to be the best black mage on the planet, which also requires that your party is there to also be the best gamers on the planet with you, it doesn't matter what you pick. You choose what works best for you, and that's good enough. I will say that the way that my recommendation is crit is easier because you can do the tricks more easily, and you will, like, once you start introducing the tricks, like the Blazer 3 trick, you will find that Speed Mage will have much less triple casts to go around, because they need those for the damage gain more frequently, whereas crit is slow enough that they have extras to spare. However, I will also say that spell speed mage is probably funnier when you're getting into the job. So my recommendation would be try the one you think is more fun. If you get deep enough into it, then you will be able to tell the weaknesses and the annoyances of the style that you chose, and you will be able to better appreciate the other one. And if you like to play other casters, then yeah, the lower spell speed build is compatible with those. Unless for some ungodly reason they decide to they decide every gear piece has spell speed crit on it. That's true. If you could get maximum crit and maximum spell speed, then that's what you would do. If you could get it, if there was a tier where every single caster piece had spell speed and crit, then you could have both. And to be clear, in the last raid tier, I played spell speed black mage for the majority of the tier, and then near the end I got so annoyed about minor issues like that specifically spell speed black mage has, that I tried slow mage and then preferred that. Full spell speed summoner, very good at level 70, not very good at max level. The key is that you want low spell speed, because all the other mages other than Black Mage don't really appreciate spell speed like Black Mage does. Black Mage is like sitting there alone with the spell speed material, like, it's okay, the others don't understand, I understand. Yes, Red Mage is like Really doesn't like spell speed. Pictomancer can use a little bit for convenience, but it's not helpful. Like, not really. And Summoner wants just enough. Like, just a very small bit. Like, they're like milk in a cup of tea. Just bloop. Perfect. And Red Mage, I think, might want even less, if any at all. And Pictomancer's the same. The idea of casting fast and still hit hard? Well, the key is that, of course, you'll do more bigger, potentially bigger numbers with crit, but you'll do more numbers with spell speed. But it also means, like, the spell speed style also means you have to think faster, because you have to do the same thing in the less time.
It's gonna be pretty damn risky.
Really weird. Every time I open a Twitch clip, it like yanks me downwards like that. We have the Yannick clip here. What's this? Oh boy. We have the Yannick clip here. As expected, it's not super long, so we can definitely get that one. A witching into resolution. How's Linsel? Hope you're doing well. Nice. That I'm impressed how much value you're getting out of this. Were all those enemies undead? Okay.
This maneuver is gonna be pretty damn risky.
I guess they were. You removed the one that wasn't. Ah, I see. Very nice. A classic Yannick stuff, guys. As some of you may know, Yannick is like a top-rated Palace of the Dead gamer. How's Kashanta? Hope you're doing well. How's Darth? Hope you're doing well as well. Good night, DPS. You see, the interesting thing there, Linsel, is that because standard step, like because you specifically mentioned Dancer, because standard step has a 30-second cooldown and by design has a fixed time it takes, because every GCD associated with standard step doesn't scale with skill speed, it quickly gets like misaligned, and the 10 GCDs you use between two standard steps finishes adds up to, 25 seconds, right? But if your GCD is 2.48, then 0.2 seconds are like left on the table, and that means that the only way that this works out is you click standard step. The action queuing says, oh, you want to click standard step? All right, now it's ready. And just holds you for an extra 0.2 seconds. The most cursed part about it is that when you have a GCD like that, your options are either delay standard step by a GCD every 30 seconds, which is not ideal, Or every 30 seconds, take all the time your skill speed actually saved you, which is the main value skill speed provides, and throw it out the window. Just, don't want that. By simply waiting those 0.2 seconds that you had gained. Which is like the particular reason why Dancer is so cursed about it, because they don't really have a choice. Many other jobs, it's less obvious. Dragoon can kinda manage, but as time passes, things get weird. Because each time you reach jump, it'll have moved slightly further along in the weaving timing. And eventually the thing you're weaving together with jump is like overlapping with the next GCD, and jump is a late weave now. And the only solution you have there is like the thing you were supposed to weave after jump, you just shove it to the next GCD. And then like everything starts to spiral because it's really like then something that is happening in the next GCD has to wait, and then the thing that happens in the next GCD has to wait, and then the thing in the next GCD has to wait. And it gets extra cursed when the things that are getting that starts to tilt and drift is your damage buffs. I think I mentioned on a somewhat recent Mentor Roulette stream that I was testing something on Reaper. So I ran the rotation for like 13 minutes, and my GCD was 248 on Reaper. And at around the 10-minute mark, which is something where Reaper's rotation starts to get weird by design because of the gauge negativity some of you may have heard about. At the same time, the 248 GCDs combined with the fixed GCD of certain actions in Reaper toolkit started to make things get weird. Some timings were wrong and stuff like that. Butterfly Spirit Spinat says, I rate my Dragoon with 243 GCD and I do okay. Yeah, if there's any amount of downtime or anything that causes things to drift for a different reason, you might not notice. Man, I still have a lot of clips. I thought I would get more. The problem when you don't have talk streams very often, so when they finally come, there's a lot to talk about. Also that discount support. Like, the very important thing there, Butterfly, isn't, I'm not saying because your GCD is wrong, you don't do damage. It's minor stuff. And it's mainly player feel. Like, as Lindsel said, it's really annoying to have 248 as Dancer. I think, I can't remember for which video, I think it was for one of my discussions about speed videos that I demonstrated Dancer on 245. And I hated that too. I think when I made my Dancer guide that I even demonstrated the rotation at a weird GCD at certain points, specifically to make it seem more realistic for someone who actually is learning the job. Because, you know, if you're watching the guide, you probably don't have BIS. And if you don't have BIS, then you might have a weird GCD. And if you have a weird GCD, then if I show you the Disneyland equivalent of this is perfect, then you're gonna feel like you're doing something wrong when it's actually the gear. Yeah, we didn't walk very far. We didn't talk very. We didn't view that. We didn't even hit half the clips, I don't think. But we did talk a lot. Thank you, Lindsel. As learned when you try to make Speed Viper, it's easy to avoid speed on max level dexterity jobs. Yeah, sometimes. Like, really weird is, so the reason why my Reaper had a 248 GCD is because I looked at it and thought, well, I mean, Reapers typically want a 249 GCD, I believe. So what can I have? I can have the Arcadian normal earring, which gives crit and a little bit of skill speed, which hits me at 248. Or I can use the crafted one that has direct hit and determination. So I picked the Arcadian one, and then when I needed to play Dragoon, I immediately went, wait a minute, I don't want to play Dragoon at 248. And then promptly bought a crafted earring anyway. If your ping is so bad that you cannot weave Stardiver without clipping, do you still use it? Yes. Although, if your ping is so bad that you can't weave Stardiver without clipping, then that's a really... That's a pretty severe problem, I think. Do you know what your latency is, Butterfly? Something worth mentioning is that Stardiver has a long enough animation lock that you can't double weave with it. You're not supposed to weave Stardiver and something else. Even with the perfect connection. Tong says, I'm pretty sure playing on a 2.5 instead of a 2.43 might actually help you not climb it. Oh, yes, absolutely. If you have lag, then playing on a slower GCD is always helpful. Case in point. Monk, the recommended GCDs of like 1.93 or 1.94 are actually a little scary when you realize how weaving works. Remember, if we just rewind a little bit, the time it takes to do an action, in most cases, is 0.6 seconds, plus your latency, plus somewhere around 30 to 50 ms on top. Which means that at best, on the perfect connection, it takes 0.63 seconds to do a thing. Times 3, that's 1.89 seconds. That's to double weave on Monk. Notice that means you have 0.04 or 0.05 seconds of leeway. Basically, the only reason why double weaving works on a reasonable connection on Monk is because of the jank that I mentioned earlier, that sometimes it just gives you a 50 ms to give back later. Like, it's so jank that the only possible explanation, when we know the factors that play in, is that the game is weird. And I'm not saying that it has to be that. I'm not like just going, well, once we know all the data, the only possible explanation is that sometimes the game just gives it to you. It is a known fact that sometimes the game just gives you like a 20th of a second. And then like on the next weave, it takes back that 20th of a second. But if the way it plays out is you go GZD, weave, and it gives you that one, and then you go GZD, and then that one is longer. But on the next GZD, you weren't going to weave anything, then it doesn't matter. Even if you just had to weave one thing, it doesn't matter. Like, it's super, super strange. Long story short, Final Fantasy XIV is really weird, and the only place that gets even more cursed than the things you can't see is the things you can see. Let me all draw your attention to the fact that we recently discovered that Maim and Mend. Y'all know what Maim and Mend does, right? Doesn't increase the healing of Star Prism. Or any healing action on a caster job since the release of Shadowbringers. Rekindle doesn't work. Everlasting Flight? Nope. Lux Solaris? Nope. Star Prism? Nope. And those are the things you can see. Why does it exist then? Well, I mean, it works on Vacure. It works on Vacure. It also works on Physic, but you'll have to take my word for it on that one. It's also worth mentioning that all healers have this trait too, and for them it works perfectly fine. There's more, like, does it so only not work for additional healing? I mean, Maim and Mend works on SIs. I couldn't possibly explain to you why the Mend part of Maim and Mend doesn't work on caster actions from Shadowbringers and onwards. I couldn't possibly explain to you why. It's just the observation that it distinctly works on Vacure. We know this for a fact. This is easy to test. We also know that it works on Physic. And Vacure is from Stormblood. But the other healing options that Summoner has that is not Physic are from Shadowbringers or Dawntrail, and they don't work. It's extra cursed because that means that the increases base damage and HP restoration of your pet thing, the HP restoration of your pet doesn't count for anything. Because the only pet healing action that you have, Everlasting Flight, isn't affected. We also have other cursed things, like it turns out from player testing that Earthly Star's actual real potency is about 41% stronger than it actually says it is. But I do believe I have included that in the video, so you probably already know this. I couldn't possibly explain to you why that is. Because it could have just had the correct potency, but it doesn't. And I just want to be clear, it's roughly 41% on the base damage, the base healing, the boosted damage, and the boosted healing. It's like roughly 41% on every single one. I don't know why. And then there was also that bit that at start of Dawntrail, prefacing this bug has been fixed, but at the start of Dawntrail, this trait didn't actually do anything for Inferno, Earthen Fury, and Aerial Blast. It changed the tooltips, but it didn't actually affect the damage. And the same patch also made this trait no longer affect Embrace and Seraphic Veil. Again, it has been fixed. But yeah, long story short, Final Fantasy XIV has a lot of weird jank. Has a lot of things where it's tied together with rubber bands and prayers. And it works well enough that we don't question it too much. Exactly, Gazel. The thing about those pet tooltips actually made the rounds on the JP side of things. Although I guess, based on the information that I shared, it was clear enough without even being able to understand English. But yeah. Final Fantasy XIV. Perfect game. No glitches, guys. It's working as intended, totally. Jank in my 14, right? Hey Wolfkin, hope you're doing well. Says, what do people do in this walk? Well, normally we walk a few places, but this time around we only did one walk at the start, and then we did a little bit of other stuff. It's generally a questions and answers discussion stream and clip review stream. But yeah, mostly not walking. But we do walk a bit. We should walk more on these. I guess we should probably go back to we walk somewhere and then we just park there. Because the back and forth might be too confusing. Or too inconsistent. Hunt, train, and talk when... Oh, that sounds really cursed. Basically, the story behind Walk and Talk is originally it was just called Tea Time. But the story behind it all is that originally, or rather, I tried a few times actually. You know, let me try again. Originally it was Tea Time, then it was Walk and Talk, and then I thought maybe if we just do something not too intense, then we can do something other than just walking and talking. So we did a Cosmic Exploration stream. What happened is that we did do some Cosmic Exploration stuff, but the conversation was entirely focused on crafting and gathering. And exactly what I was doing. Which meant that it didn't really lend itself very well for talking about other things. Whereas with the Walk and Talk stream, maybe we'll talk about where we're going, but most of the conversation is about anything. And by making sure there is nothing else. Good luck, Evis. By making sure there is nothing else, then it means that we don't have that something else drawing the attention so that we can't ask a question, because I believe part of the problem was that because people, you know, hop into a Cosmic Exploration stream, they would feel like it would be off topic to ask something combat job related or something else. What's your opinion on the new Dawntrail fish? I didn't even know there was a new Dawntrail fish. Difficult to have an opinion then. The dreaded purse of riches. Oh boy. Likes not being around. Ah, fantastic. That's a classic big fish. Anyway, I do think we should be rounding up the stream. Hopefully I will find it in my schedule to have another Walk and Talk sooner so that there isn't twice as many clips next time again. Or maybe I'll find out a way to just have a longer one, or something, or that we can get more clips done. But I do think that this is the time to wrap up the stream. So, if you would like to be part of the Discord community server, there's a link right there in the chat. There you'll find the weekly schedule where you can see what else is coming up in the coming days. You'll all usually updated Sunday or Monday. You'll also find the announcement room with links to videos when I put them out. And if you grab the reminder roll in the role assignments room, you'll get a notification whenever I post a video or stream. There's an extra one around 15 minutes before stream starts, so you can catch it right when we go live. And if you'd like to support the channel even more directly, you can like, follow, subscribe, become a member, super chat, cheer, all of that. Or if you don't like any of those options, there's also the Ko-Fi link. Right there in the chat. It all helps support me and the channel directly, so I can focus on doing stuff like this with all of you. So thanks so much for support. But I think that'll be it for tonight. The best I could do is triple amount of clips. You know, that is probably what's gonna happen. Where's the fun fact? Would you like a fun fact? I feel like I've covered a lot of fun facts tonight already. Fun fact, back in the day, Adel actually reduced mind and intelligence on the target. And if you go even further back, I do believe that summoners and scholars uniquely also reduced physical stats on top. Now, I will see if we can raid somebody over on Twitch. But with that said, good night, good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending where in the world, and I'll see you all very soon. Bye-bye!